See, first session, I had to forget to unmute myself. We are live. Thank you for coming. And this is the first session of Ask Me Anything, which is badly named because it's not Ask Me Anything. It's two of us. There is Darin, who is probably going to appear at one moment. There he is. There's Darin, right? So it's Ask Us Anything, right? Type of session. And the first of the kind, we got a bunch of questions which we are going to answer. We might not be able to answer all the questions, but some of them. And the questions can be anything. And we reserve the right not to answer if we have no idea. In any case, this is Ask Us Anything session where we go through your questions and answer them and live happily ever after. If there are more questions than we can answer, we're going to do this periodically, maybe once a week, every second week. We'll figure it out yet. Now, a few housekeeping things. If you have questions that you did not ask in advance, ask them in the chat. We are going to put them on the screen and then try to answer them. So let's try to make this as interactive as possible. And let's start. What would be the first question? Hey, can you please tell us how to perform canary deployments? Which tools do you use? Oh, this is an easy one. There are two. I will assume that you are running in Kubernetes, that you're using Kubernetes to deploy stuff. And if that's true, if that's not true, let me know. In Kubernetes, there are only two tools that matter for canary deployments or progressive delivery in general. That would be Argo Rollouts or Flagger. Argo Rollouts is part of Argo family, and Flagger is part of Weaveworks' set of products. Both of them are amazing. Both of them are good. I cannot say which one is better. You cannot go wrong with either of the two. Usually people choose depending on whether they adopted Flux for GitOps or Argo CD for GitOps as well. So it depends which family you choose. Next one. What are the tasks we can perform on SonarQube as DevOps engineer? Could you please explain and suggest some videos on SonarQube for Python projects? Unfortunately, I haven't used SonarQube for years now. I'm not sure, Darin, whether you used SonarQube recently.
I haven't.
Or you have experience with it.
I've got some experience with it, but I haven't used it real recently.
So sorry for that. I think that I'm seeing SonarQube less and less. I think that it is slowly fading. It is still very much present in big enterprises, but it is slowly fading. And I think that, okay, so here's the deal. Here's a story that is not really directly related with SonarQube. I think that those tools have very limited value. People get hooked onto, hey, what is our test coverage? What is our completeness? What is this? What is that? And really forget that it's not really about test coverage. It is not about the percentage of successful or failed tests for at least two reasons. First of all, it's about quality of tests, not the coverage. I would have rather 20% coverage with tests that are doing the good thing, the real thing, than 100% of coverage of tests that are useless, especially tests that are flaky and fail for random reasons. Second reason why I don't think that those tools are exceptionally good is because if you exclude legacy projects, which would be a separate subject, and I can talk about it, just let me know in the comments. I think that successfulness of tests should be either 100% or not 100%. If tests fail, you need to fix them. You cannot go and say, hey, we are successful because in the past we had 44% of the tests that were failing, and now we have 30% of the tests that are failing, which is what SonarQube gives you in a way. So I really think that it should be binary. Either it's successful or fail, and I don't care to see about percentages of how many failed. Either they failed or they didn't, right? That should be the logic that we should strive for. And if you have tests that are flaky, that are constantly failing for random reasons and are not reliable, then remove those tests. It's better to remove the tests you don't trust than to keep them for some statistic purposes. What is the best way to learn DevOps by myself without joining a company? The best way, without doubt, is watching this channel. But on a serious note, I don't have a good recommendation. I think it's just about really taking things one by one, figuring them out, and most importantly, it's about figuring out how those tools fit together, right? And I think that that's kind of where people tend to fail. It's not about learning 5 tools. It's about figuring out how those tools fit together into a process, a system, what's or not, right? That should be really a goal. Whenever you pick up a new tool from the bucket, after spending maybe a day figuring out the basis of the tool, the most important thing, especially if you're talking about DevOps, is how does that fit into the big picture, right? So I tend to always put myself a task, apart from evaluating a tool, apart from figuring it out, I always spend just as much or more time trying to figure out where in the picture it fits, what it should be combined with, where in the process it should be placed in and stuff like that, right? So it's really mostly about, learning a tool is easy. You just got to read me and figure it out. Learn how it, follow the description. Figuring out how it fits, where it fits, that's the real challenge. Now, before we go to the new question, very quick housekeeping. Since recently, like a couple of weeks ago, I enabled donations to the channel, which helps because this happens to cost a lot in equipment and editing and what's not. And you can also join the channel, become a member. There aren't many perks. Let me tell you that in advance. Except that we will have member-only meetings. So it's not much about perks, but it's about you showing that you want to support the channel with your money. Not much. It's less than a coffee, though. Anyways, what's the next question? If you program Java, would you use IntelliJ IDEA or VS Code? VS Code. So I might be wrong, actually. I might not be saying the correct thing. Darin is going to jump in. So I haven't been working with Java a lot in a while. But the reason why I said VS Code, even though I'm not really working much with Java, is the ecosystem around VS Code, right? It happens to be present everywhere. If you pick up, let's say, Gitpod, to do whatever Gitpod is doing, you're going to see VS Code. If you pick up this tool, you're going to see VS Code. It's becoming a black hole with the gravity that is almost unavoidable. And now Darin is going to prove me wrong.
I'm not going to prove you wrong. I would say today, literally this day, I would still stick with IntelliJ if I am doing hardcore Java development. VS Code, like if I'm just doing some starter kit type stuff, VS Code is fine. But there's enough built-in tooling, and because IntelliJ has been around for so long, it's going to still serve you better from code completion, and it's just more functionally rich just because it's been out longer. I'm not saying either is right or wrong. I'm just saying if you need those extra helpers, IntelliJ tends to be a little bit better today.
I must concur simply because I'm not using Java for a while now.
Yeah. So.
Shall we put one of the questions from before and then move back to the live questions, kind of mix them up a bit? Because FYI for everybody, we were collecting questions from you for a while, and there's a bunch of them. So let's mix them up a bit.
Okay, so here's one that we got from, I'm not even going to try the name, so forgive me.
Yeah, names are out of the questions. I cannot pronounce even my name correctly. We never hear Microsoft in your videos. How come? Now, the answer to that is relatively straightforward. Actually, it's not as straightforward. What am I talking about? Most of the things I do are not really directly related with not only Microsoft, but actually, I assume that you're talking about Azure now, not Microsoft. If you're talking about Azure, I rarely do videos specific to Azure, AWS, or Google. There are some exceptions. And in case of Azure, I did the one about container instances, I think is the name, and a few others. And I might have done a bit more from Google. But in any case, if you have a suggestion about specific service or product or anything from Microsoft, just let me know and I will do that. I did GitHub Actions, of course. That's Microsoft. I did the one about GitHub CLI. You're not right. I did actually, now when I think about it, if I include everything from Microsoft, I think actually did probably more from Microsoft than from others. By others, I mean Google and AWS. I'm just forgetting, Microsoft is so big that you don't even know which tools they have anymore, right? GitHub is there, GitHub Actions is theirs, CLI is theirs, Visual Studio Code is theirs. It's everything now.
You're stretching. I think his question might have been towards, why aren't you talking .NET, IIS, that ecosystem of Microsoft?
Okay, that might be as well. I rarely talk about programming languages, right? It's more about tools, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Should we go back to the live questions?
Yeah.
Okay, let me do that. Let me figure out, where were we? We were right here. Oh, this is the next one. And I'm going through these in order, so
Sure.
if your question's already there, don't ask it again. We're just going through from the top. So we'll get to it or not, depending on if we run out of time. So what do you think about this? Are there any practice projects? I've seen some that are, from a security perspective, it's like a completely busted Kubernetes project, but besides that, I don't know.
I don't know, to be honest. I have no answer to that question, mostly because I tend to pick up tools in their very early stages when there are no such things. And then when practice projects for something, Kubernetes or anything else, come along, I'm probably very deep into it. So I have no answer to that question. I'm sorry.
Really? Nothing? Okay.
Nothing. I don't know of
All
any Kubernetes practice project. That's really,
Okay.
I'm disappointed at myself now.
Do you have your notebook beside you?
Yeah.
Write it down.
No, I don't. But I
Okay.
have Visual Studio
That's
Code.
fine. Okay, got it. All right. Just a couple of things. Hi from Morocco. TC, how
Hey.
you doing? There is our friend Eric. How you doing, Eric?
Hey, Eric.
Which beer? That's a valid question. What's
Which
your
beer am I drinking? San Miguel.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether that exists outside of Spain.
I don't know, and I don't drink, so no beer for me. Good vibes. Can you make a video on Helm chart deployment? This is interesting.
Yes.
Don't you already have one?
Definitely. I don't. Actually, I have it in the course, but not in the YouTube channel. So the course, the DevOps catalog, something, the last one we did, there is a book actually as well, has a section about Helm specifically. And since we did it there, I never thought to revisit it until now as for YouTube. So I added it to our to-do list, and I cannot guarantee when though. But yeah, that's something interesting that we might want to do again. Do you believe true DevOps can be achieved in an air-gapped system on a network that is not connected to the internet? Definitely, yes. But our definitions of DevOps might be slightly different, right? By DevOps, I consider first and before anything else, self-sufficient teams that contain both development and operational knowledge. Whether that's one person knowing all or a team that has all that experience is a separate subject. And then being able to be self-sufficient to develop, deploy, test, monitor yourself. And when I say yourself, meaning your team, up to 10 people, never bigger than that. I think that is just as achievable in air-gapped system as in not air-gapped system, right? I don't know. I don't know that one. I do not know what's the best firewall for Kubernetes, to be honest. That happens whenever I was in situations like that. That was done by somebody else, so I haven't had practical experience myself. Sorry for that. There are many things I never tried. Do you have thoughts about best practices for GitOps bare metal deployments? Now, I assume that today, if you're starting from scratch, I mean, it's still Kubernetes, right? So it's more about, and since it's Kubernetes, we're still talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, it might not be Kubernetes, but if it's Kubernetes on bare metal, then the rules are the same. You will still use Argo CD or Flux, store your manifests in a Git repository, let them figure it out. And that's for applications. Now, for configuring those bare metal deployments, you need something that is dealing with infrastructure or configuration management. And then you would either use something like, and this is now, FYI, I work for a company that is behind the product I'm going to mention, but you can use Crossplane that is that can work with bare metal as well, at least some of them. And if not, you can create a provider. And if you want to go with something else, then you would need to change the direction. Since GitOps in most implementations is a pool-based mechanism, something running in your server, in your cluster, pulling manifests from Git, you might want to reverse that and go more for pipeline type of stuff instead of GitOps type of stuff, where you would trigger a process, whether you're using Ansible, Terraform, CF Engine, Puppet, whatever you're using to manage those bare metal servers, right? But now I just noticed that you are saying explicitly bare metal deployments. It really depends whether it's Kubernetes or not. If it's Kubernetes, Flux, Argo CD still works. Doesn't matter that it's bare metal. If we're talking about direct deployments like SSHing, then we're talking about pipelines rather than really GitOps.
Let's cut over to one of our previous. I know I'm not on screen, but that's okay. Let's go to this one.
10,000 feet overview on current Kubernetes developer platforms available, pros and cons. That's big. So I would say that there are three types of platforms, or maybe more than three. There is use Kubernetes directly, right? And that would be directly EKS, AKS, GKE, Red Hat, Rancher, whatever, right? And I think that wouldn't qualify as developer platforms for a simple reason, because they themselves alone do not provide tooling sufficient to enable developers to use those platforms. Simply because Kubernetes itself is too complex for us to do that. And I do think that Kubernetes was never meant to be used directly, right? Kubernetes is more like a set of building blocks to create what you call here developer platforms. So our options are essentially like with anything else. You go with something highly opinionated, or you build it yourself, right? And both have pros and cons. If you go with highly opinionated, then you need to adapt to the opinions of that platform, right? So you get the platform, opinionated platform, that can be anything from OpenShift. OpenShift is somewhere in the middle. It is actually opinionated, but also allows you to tweak it. Or you go with Google Cloud Run would qualify, I think, with that category as well, and a few others. So opinionated, you need to adapt to it. Once you adapt to how that platform works, then you get, if you can adapt, you get great results almost from day one. Alternative, and where I think we are going, is be able to create opinionated developer platforms yourself. So rather than choosing a tool that is already ready to be shipped to developers, to choose the tool that allows you, like SRE, sysadmin, operator, whatever you are, to create the developer platform yourself. And that requires more work, obviously, but the results are usually better because then you can create a platform that specifically fulfills your needs. And that's where I think that we are going as industry, and that's where those are the kind of two categories above Kubernetes itself: highly opinionated, out-of-the-box experience. You need to adapt to it or build your own. Huge investment initially, better results later, assuming that you know what you're doing, right? And that's where I think that in a few years' time, we will not be seeing Kubernetes anymore. I think that Kubernetes will become an implementation detail, just like the example I tend to use often, like hypervisors, right? Hypervisors are extremely important. Many of us had to work directly with hypervisors 20 years ago or 15. And today, almost nobody knows what hypervisors are simply because we work directly on a higher level of abstraction, which are VMs.
Okay. Let's go back here. About this one.
How do you respond to people who complain that Kubernetes is too complicated? That's a good one as well.
Here. Hey, Kubernetes is too complicated. Respond.
It is.
It is, but based on what you were just talking about from the 10,000-foot view, was it done? Did we do it to ourselves?
So usually answer with a question to that question. And that question is there an easier way, less complicated way to accomplish the things that Kubernetes gives us? Because saying Kubernetes is too complicated is true. It is complex because the things that it does are complex. But the real question is, two questions actually. Do you need what Kubernetes gives you? If the answer is no, then don't use it. Do you need auto-scaling? Do you need fault tolerance? Do you need high availability? Do you need all the things that Kubernetes, or some of the things that Kubernetes gives us? If the answer is no, then the answer is don't use it. It is too complex for your needs. And what you need is something much simpler than Kubernetes. Just, let's say, AWS Lightsail. Use Lightsail. Lightsail is so much easier than Kubernetes. It doesn't give you the things that Kubernetes gives you, but it's much simpler. Now, if you do need what Kubernetes gives you, like, encryption on the networking layer, ingress, auto-scaling, all the things, not all, some of the things that Kubernetes gives us, my counter argument is that there is nothing less complex than Kubernetes. Kubernetes is the simplest solution we have today for the things it does. Huh?
Okay.
Hi, both, and takes in advance. We're moving from Rancher 1.6.30 Docker Compose approach to Rancher 2.4 that relies on Kubernetes. Any good practice to follow that you can suggest? Yes, you will need to learn Kubernetes unless you already. I'm assuming that some people or all, I'm not sure about your context, are used to Docker Compose because they're not familiar with Kubernetes. And once you move there, and simply there is no magic bullet, you will need to write your Kubernetes manifests either directly. Most likely you should use Helm or Customize. There are videos in this channel to compare them. There are pros and cons of both. So you need to figure out many things. It's going to be a painful transition. The important thing is that once you move to Kubernetes, and simply you cannot not move to Kubernetes because there is no future for Docker Compose in production. Absolutely not, right? That's never going to come back. So Kubernetes is the only option you have, and there is no advice except you will need to spend time figuring out how Kubernetes works. It doesn't really matter that it's Rancher. That's completely irrelevant in that story. It could be anything else. What is important is to eventually sunset compose and do not keep using it locally. And I see that all the time. People say, hey, compose is easier than Kubernetes. It is, absolutely. And therefore, and we have to use Kubernetes in production, understandable. Therefore, we are going to use Docker Compose locally and for local development, and Kubernetes, Helm, customize whatever you're using for production and staging environments and what's not. And that happens to be more complicated because the real complexity is defining the manifests of everything you need, right? And there are tools to help you, those opinionated tools that I mentioned before, like Shipa, the previous company I worked with, allows you to kind of like skip that part, which is also risky. But anyways, once you transition your production to Kubernetes, from there on, local development from Kubernetes becomes just as easy or easier than Compose, which might sound counterintuitive, but think about it. Once you define the manifests, Helm charts, whatever you're using in Kubernetes, then it's just as easy to run Helm install as Docker Compose up. And the added benefit is a couple of them. First, you do not need to define the same things twice because those are incompatible formats. You do not need, if you already have Kubernetes manifests for production, why would you maintain Compose manifests for local development? That makes no sense to me. Second, your local development will be much closer to what your production is. It's never going to be the same, but it's going to be much closer. So if there is one advice, that is not to keep Compose for local development. Many people do that, and I think it's a huge mistake. When should you use VPA over HPA in Kubernetes? I'd imagine that there are cases where you must use both, but I can't think of any. I personally haven't found an example of, actually there is a use case where you might want to use both. So let's go first one by one, right? Horizontal HPA is horizontal pod autoscaler, which means that when you need more of something, new replicas of that something are created, right? And vertical pod autoscaler means that it will increase the memory and CPU of your application and scale it vertically. So instead of creating new replicas of your application, it will increase the limits of memory and CPU. Now, the reason why you might want to combine those is to save on resource utilization, right? Because let's say that your application can handle up to 4 gigabytes of RAM, right? That's the limit after which you want to scale horizontally. So the scenario would be when you reach 4 gigs of RAM, after that we see degradation in performance, scale horizontally. However, with vertical pod autoscaler, you might want to set that, hey, I start with 1 gigabyte and then go up to 4. And then as VPA is adjusting that, Kubernetes is also adjusting, because if you start by setting 4 gigs of RAM in that fictitious example, Kubernetes will allocate 4 gigabytes of RAM for that application, even though it might be using only 4, right? So for helping Kubernetes better allocate resources to that application, you might want to use VPA, but HPA is the key always. Unless application cannot really scale horizontally, then there is only one choice, that's VPA.
Why don't you take a second and talk about the channel again?
Oh yeah, so again, the channel, I have icons for everything now. I got animations. That's why we need you to support the channel, because I'm paying people to do the animations you're seeing right now. So like it, subscribe to the channel, do all the things that you typically do. And on top of that, now we accept donations. It's up to you to choose how much you donate. And we are really, really, really grateful for any of them. And you can join the channel, become a member, tiny, tiny, tiny fee. You choose which one you want to do. And basically, by that, you're showing that, hey, this is useful to you. and I want to help the channel financing. And trust me, neither me nor Darin are getting rich of this. This goes to covering expenses, at least right now. Stateful set example. Stateful set example, please. So the two people before this session, those are the comments from before, asked about stateful set examples. And now I am unfortunately not really prepared, so we are going to wing it a bit. But first I'm going to share my screen, and then Darren is going to add that screen that we can see. There we are. Okay, so here's my GitHub repository. Let me see one repo that I have some example. Here we are, specs. I think I must have something here. Let me find an example of stateful set. This is from one of the books that we wrote a long time ago. So let's see this one. Right now, specification. What's the question of specification? I think specification is almost the same as deployment, right? So if you would change the word stateful set to deployment, there would be almost no differences between stateful set and deployment. There are a few, but they're not really important. So no difference, or close to no difference, between stateful set and deployment in a way how we define it. The differences are in how they work. And there are two major differences between stateful set and deployment. The first one is how volumes are mounted. So if I have here an example with 3 replicas. Now, if this would be a deployment, this volume mount actually, would mount one volume to all 3 replicas. So all 3 replicas of that deployment would share the same volume. And in this specific example that I'm using Mongo, that could not work. I could not make Mongo work as a deployment with 3 replicas and one mount, simply because each instance of MongoDB needs a unique, let's say, volume, because they cannot write on the same file system, on the same files. Now, if this would be stateful set as it is, those 3 replicas would get a volume each. So in this example, with 3 replicas, there would be 3 pods, one representing each replica, and each of them would get a unique volume mounted, right? The second difference between stateful sets and deployments is in naming and the order in which things are happening. So if you have 3 replicas of a deployment, naming would be, in this case, how do I call it? DB would be DB and then dash and some random hash, unique hash string. In case of stateful sets, it would be db-1, db-0, db-1, db-2. And that's important because when you have stateful, and actually before I go into important part, and they would always start in that order. db-0 first, db-1 second, db-2 third. And then when you update them or shut them down, they would be shut down in the inverse order, 2, 1, 0. So you know the order in which things would be created and things would be shut down or things would be updated. And that order tends to be often important for stateful applications. So the order of creating pods, destroying pods, updating pods, what's or not, and volumes being mounted in each replica instead of one replica, all replicas sharing the same volume. Those are the two major differences.
I want to test something here. Hang on a second. We actually have a new member. TT joined up as a new member. And we also had Durhazi. Please forgive me if I said that wrong. So thanks for joining the channel. We appreciate it.
Oh, welcome. Thank you so much. Hey, wait, there is up. If you go up in comments, there is Dor Sivan as well.
Oh, really?
And Oz Kolog.
Oh, yeah.
I cannot pronounce. Kologlo.
Yeah, so there was became a YouTube member. See, this is, so our other channel doesn't get this type of information. So, well, we haven't had members. So, cool.
Yeah,
Thanks.
we don't.
So it's-
Until now, we did not
We're
know
using new
how
tools.
it works.
Yeah, so we have new tools. Okay, cool. Let me get back to the next question. Are you okay on stateful sets? I sort of butted in there because I was trying to figure out how
Yeah,
this works.
yeah, no.
Okay.
Perfect. This is all random. Let's see how as we go.
Let's talk about this. Let's any guide on or recommendation on how to implement Prometheus stack using Argo CD.
I'm not sure what you mean, Santiago. I don't have anything special unless you have a specific issue, to be honest, because Prometheus stack is just a set of Kubernetes manifests. You store those manifests in Git, and Argo CD manages them. The only thing that is important to know is that sometimes, and I'm now not talking really directly about Prometheus, but in general, sometimes you might want to tell Argo CD to exclude certain fields from its calculation, because in some cases, the first example that comes to my mind would be Argo rollouts or Flagger, that sometimes the definition of a resource in Kubernetes is changing at runtime, and that might be the case with Prometheus. And then if it changes at runtime, then Argo CD or Flux would undo those changes because it says, hey, this is not what you defined in Git. So sometimes you might want to exclude certain parts of the definition from Argo CD or Flux. That's the only thing that comes to my mind. If you have something specific, let me know. Otherwise, treat it as any other Kubernetes resource.
Cool. And we've got a couple of super stickers here. We've got a super sticker from Chris. Thank you. And a super sticker from TT as well. Wow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let me get back to
Darin, we need to, now that we're getting stickers and what's not, we need to figure out all the currencies in the world. Kind of like,
we should, yes. I can learn it. I can learn it. I want to go back to, I saw a question. And I can tell you today we're not going to get through all the questions. So Victor, make sure, since this is our first thing, don't trim this video because we need to hang on to these chats. We need to capture all those before we trim it out.
yes.
So
And can we commit right now that we're going to do that as long as questions are coming? I don't mean today, but kind of weekly, bi-weekly basis, something like that.
something, yeah. Based on
We'll figure
our
it out.
schedules. Yeah, we just don't know exactly what that's going to be yet. Let's get to one of TT's questions here, another one of them. What's the benefits of using labels?
Oh, to begin with, before we go into benefits, labels are the glue in Kubernetes. You cannot not use labels in a way, right? And a good example would be deployment. Kubernetes, when you create a Kubernetes deployment creates a replica set. A replica set creates pods. And they all know how to do those and what is the relation between all those resource types through labels. So when you create a deployment, you tell it, hey, those are the labels you should monitor for and use when creating a replica set. And when you create the replica set, and you're telling replica set, hey, create those pods and track those pods through the labels. So labels are how Kubernetes resources are tracking the parent-child relationship. And there is a lot of parent-child relationships. One resource is creating another creating another, and so on and so forth. So that's Kubernetes' way of tracking that relationship. And on top of that, you might, from human perspective, or from not only human perspective, but from tooling perspective, labels are also essential. Like previous question mentioned Prometheus, right? When you start querying metrics of different entities of your Kubernetes cluster, you're going to do that most likely through labels. Initially, you might say, hey, let me see what this thing with this name is doing. But you're going to soon discard it. To begin with, names are kind of names include hashtags in Kubernetes because you're almost never creating a pod, so you don't know what is the name of the pod. You're going to find that pod through a label. And after that, you're going to, in Prometheus at least, you're going to discover that, hey, I don't want to track a one pod. I want to track a set of pods, a set of services, and so on and so forth. So it's a filtering mechanism both used internally by Kubernetes and by you through other tooling you will be using. Same thing goes for logging and almost everything else. It's how we filter stuff in Kubernetes through labels.
So I want to go ahead and butt in here. We got a $5 super chat from G. Vodden. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi from Canada. Can you do a video on Kubernetes certifications?
No, because I'm not certified myself, so I don't know how they work. Are you certified, Darin?
No, I'm not certified.
So I'm not. I don't know. I never took a certification. I have no idea. I would like to do that, Gordon, but I don't know how. I would need to. Okay, so here's the deal. If I ever go to vacation, and I don't remember last time I was on vacations, and I decide not to work on vacations, I will take the certification exam myself, and then I can do something around it.
Okay. And thanks to Prakash for becoming a YouTube member as well.
Thank you.
Let me get back to where we were. So I saw a question from Neil that I wanted to bring in. Neil is one of our regulars over on DevOps Paradox here. I guess I could pull myself up here. And I am, good grief. Okay, here, hang on. This UI has a little bit to be desired. Okay, here we go. There's Neil's question. Argo CD best practices. Suggests. Go for it. Config from source code. Okay, I actually just had this question, not specifically around Argo CD, but I had a meeting this morning that goes specifically to this scenario of separating configs from the source.
Yes.
Whoa. So, what?
I had quite a few conversations on that subject, sometimes very heated, right? Because people have different preferences. I will tell you mine, right? And explain why that preference is that preference. So I start with the premise that a code of an application is in a Git repository. And when working with that application, we need to have more than code. We need to have tests there because we are running tests. It's very inconvenient to have tests somewhere else, right? For that specific application. We have build scripts because while developing, we need to build something. We have deployment manifests because while developing, we want to deploy that something. What I'm trying to say is that I think that a repository of a single application should be self-sufficient and have everything that application needs. And that cannot include everything except deployments, except the manifests that describe that application and for Kubernetes, right? So my initial premise is that it makes sense that manifests of the application are in the repository of that application. But what doesn't make sense is that information specific to an environment, like this is how we tweak those manifests, that application for production and this is how we tweak and customize that application for staging is. Simply for a couple of reasons. First, if we keep the production-specific manifest in the repo of the application, then we are going to enter into a loop from which it is very hard to get out. So imagine you push something to that repo, and that triggers a pipeline or whatever that builds something, builds a container image, run tests, what's or not, and then at one moment it needs to update and say, hey, the tag of that application running in production is this one. Push that change to Git. If that change is pushed to the same repository, then that would initiate the same pipeline over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? And even if you circumvent that, even if you solve that problem of infinite loop, it would still, in my head, and I might be wrong, not make sense, because what I want when defining an environment is to know what that environment is. right? Hey, those are the 57 applications we run in production. Those are the specific tags, specific hosts, and all the things specific to production. So in other words, what I tend to do is have a repository for each environment. And let's say that I'm using Argo CD. Same would approach, same story would apply to Flux as well, right? So I have production environment that says Argo CD application manifests that references the manifests of that application in the repository of that application, and then overwrites the things that are specific to production. Like this is the domain, this is that, whatever things are specific. So in other words, one repository for each environment. Manifests in those repositories are referencing manifests that are in the repository of specific application, right? So the number of repositories in total would be the number of applications plus the number of environments.
Okay. I want to try something here. No, that doesn't work. I wish that would work. Okay. So you actually have a new member. Marcin, thank you for becoming a new member.
Thank you.
Okay, this is sort of like, I'm heading back up, but I saw this one. Are developers overrated?
No, they're underrated.
They're underrated.
I think that all the people working in our industry are developers. Everybody's writing code. I think that people not writing code are overrated, right? These days we're moving into area that does not matter what your specialty is, whether you're specialized in testing, in front-end, in back-end, in databases, in infrastructure, in this and that, you're writing code. And if you're writing code, you're a developer. I do not consider only people who write front-end applications developers, right? External user-facing front-end applications. That can be internal usage. There are people who write services for internal usage, internal platforms, managing infrastructure. We're all doing that through code. So everybody's developer. So if developers are overrated, then everybody related to software development is underrated.
Okay. And we've got about 12 minutes left, and we are into the 5th minute from the top of the hour of questions. So obviously, there will be another session. Oh, I guess I keep forgetting to put myself up. See, I'm playing producer role today. I'm not playing talent today. And
shall we switch next time?
No. I don't want you pushing the buttons. No.
Okay.
But anyway, so this is a question that I think is a good one. But I'm going to simplify it. Is it valid to set up X to build images and Y to deploy them?
I was about to say that there is, I would change this question. Is it valid to use pipeline tools to build images and GitOps tools to deploy them? That would be a more generic, I think, valid question, right? And the answer is yes. And I don't like that Argo CD has the word CD over there because that's not CD. And I don't like that Flux CD is having CD there because it's not CD. CD is done through pipelines because continuous delivery, continuous deployment, whatever you put behind the acronym CD is about automating the full life cycle of an application or maybe a service or infrastructure, whatever that is, from beginning to the end. And deployment is only a part of that because we need to get the code, we need to build something, we need to store that something somewhere. Let's say we need to build container image. We need to push that image to a registry. We need to run some tests, and we need to deploy it. That's a bare minimum. And each of those stages can be multiplied by many times and so on and so forth. So the major change, I think, from pipeline tools and how we were using them before and now is that traditionally, those pipeline tools at one moment would execute a command like kubectl apply, Helm install, customize this and that. Whatever the deployment mechanism we were using in the past. What pipeline tools are doing now, only for that part, they're doing much more, right? But related to deployment, are getting the code of that environment-specific repository that I was mentioning before, clone it, modify some manifest, push it back, right? And then Argo CD or Flux would make sure that that's synchronized. They effectively do the deployment. I don't like to even use the word deployment anymore because it's a bit misleading, but yeah, do the deployment. So yes, it's a perfectly valid. The short version of the answer to your question is yes.
We got 2 new members here. We have Nitin and we have Kenny. Thanks for joining up to the channel.
Well, I like the last
much.
name. It says long time YouTube member. I almost misread it.
Oh, right. That is pretty funny. Let me find. So this is okay, y'all. StreamYard, I love you, but I need to be able to get back where I was. I know you're working on it, but it's a little challenging. Let's see here. Where was, I believe this is Chris's question. Yeah, this is the one. How can you handle privileges or secure credentials in a team? Should each team member have full privileges on all production services? Wait, I have an answer for that.
Okay.
That's called, that's no. Including in central data. Okay, so how should you do credentials? It's 2021. Should you use a service that does credentials?
So let's start with the ideal situation. Ideal situation is nobody has privileges to access anything. From security perspective, that's the ideal situation, right? Now, from productivity perspective, traditionally that's a horrible situation because if I cannot access anything, then I cannot do anything because I cannot access anything. Therefore, I need to always delegate, ship, throw over the wall the tasks to specialized teams that have specialized privileges. Now, this is where the previous subject of GitOps, I think, kicks in. How about we do both? You can do everything you're allowed to do, you should do, without being able to access anything. And that means that we run our pipelines that build stuff, do things in specialized environments. We'll call it CI cluster or whatever, right? A cluster environment that can build things, that's already solved for a while now. But instead of you or other tools accessing directly production to deploy things, you push things to Git. And if you're not supposed to, you as a person or a tool, if it's not supposed to deploy directly, then instead of pushing to the main line, create a pull request. If there should be a human approving that, merge that human, that person should merge that pull request. So what I'm really trying to say is that we are now in a place where you can be as productive as you would be by having full access to everything without having full access to everything, simply because we have tools that can interpret your intentions, defined and push to Git and do the things for us.
Okay. Let's see if we can get 2 more in real quick. What are your top 3 Kubernetes tools or projects?
I didn't think about this in advance, so I might change, after thinking a bit, I might change my opinion. But let's say the first ones that come to my mind would be Argo CD or Flux. I think it's absolutely amazing, essential, everybody needs it. What else? It's difficult to say, really. There are more than 3. Prometheus is unavoidable. I think that it should be baked into Kubernetes at one moment, right? Prometheus would be second, probably. And then Helm or Customize qualifies Kubernetes projects. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do anything.
Okay. let's let this next one be our last one for today. And again, we'll capture all these and figure out when we're going to do this next.
Yeah.
Hey, for me, I know it's not going to happen next week. So Victor, if you're going to drive by yourself, you can do it, but I can't next week.
We'll figure out
We'll
later.
figure out what it is. It may be 2 weeks or something. But anyway, for everybody that's been here with us live today, thanks for being here. Here's the last question for today. And again, we're capturing them all, so we'll get to them. It may take time. So, would you recommend using
Yes.
Argo for data pipelines? Why not?
Yes, I would recommend it. So let me say that first, that's not the main area of that I'm involved in. So I'm not as deep in data as in other things. So I might be wrong, but I would probably, from what I know from second hand, rather than practical experience, I would probably choose Argo over those that you mentioned there, Flow, Perfect, Dagster. I'm not saying that based on experience. I'm saying that more at looking the adoption rates, looking the interest that people looking into those things have and things like that. So I might be completely wrong, by the way. Data is not my main focus, but I would say yes. And one more thing, among other things, so I'm not following, so I don't know who is exactly using Argo. I know that many. And I think that this is now referring to Argo workflows for data processing pipelines. What I do know is that Argo was born in Intuit, and they made it for their internal purposes, and precisely to handle data pipelines on massive scale, right? So it was born from the real need used by a real company that happens to outsource it without really looking into some commercial interest. So as a minimum, I know it solves one company's problem at huge scale, as a minimum, right?
Okay. That's going to need to be it for today. Victor, since this is your show and your channel,
Haha. No,
I'm
it's
gonna
our channel. You just don't appear in it.
I just don't appear in it. I'm pulling the strings in certain places. So I'm going to let you close this out. Again, this was the first one that we did, so we don't have all the cool bells and whistles, but Victor does have some cool bells and whistles, and then I'm going to step out, let Victor close it up.
Those, no?
And
I don't know.
it's going to be very abrupt when it closes, so we don't have anything cool at the end. So, Victor, here you go.
Thank you all so much. First of all, I'm overwhelmed by how many of you came in. I'm overwhelmed with the number of questions we had and the support and you becoming members and the stickers and all that stuff. I'm really overwhelmed. I did not expect this. This is absolutely amazing. And we're definitely going to do this on a regular cadence because there are much more questions than we could answer in one session. We just need to figure out the logistics, when and how, to be announced. But thank you all for joining. Thank you all for being here, and thank you all for support. We really, really, really appreciate it.
Is that it?
That's it. I'm not prepared. That's the only thing that came to my mind.
Okay. So wave bye, Victor. Look in the camera. Look at the camera and wave goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you all.